Thanks very much. I'm not sure about secret. You probably already know the secret. It's just my brain and the way it works. One of the issues I have is I tend to be a strategic thinker, and so I tend to be ahead of the crowd, and I think, yeah, we can go there, and I look back, and I've left everybody behind me. So I try to develop a framework which actually explains what's going on in my head. Firstly, just a sort of thought that in the news today is about the NHS. I work at Queen Victoria Hospital. It's all elective care there, and we have a trauma and minor injuries, but we've had to cancel all of our operations, etc. And I couldn't go by without saying something, obviously come from the NHS. I've worked for 10, 15 years with consultants, doctors, nurses, and I can safely say that apart from one or two which you get in all industries, they are incredibly dedicated. And I completely support, I'm not taking a political stance here, but I completely support what they're doing. So that's just a sort of an aside. So thanks for joining me here today. I just want to talk about a couple of things. Where do we fit into an organisation? The first thing I find, so I go into organisations and I work in transformation. I do mostly interim work. And the first thing I want to know is where do I actually fit in that organisation? Where's the decision making? And the second thing is, I'd like to show you a framework that I've developed which goes with that, where do I fit and how I can actually help to move things along. Hopefully from today you'll get an understanding of how you might get some order in if you've got a chaotic situation. I know we're going to get a talk later from the gentleman from B&Q. Sounds like he had a similar experience. And it's about often I get launched into these places and you think, what on earth? It's like rabbit in the headlights. So for 15 years I've been working as a Director of Estates and Facilities. I've been both in the public and private sector. I've worked for 10 years in healthcare. I've worked for all sorts of organisations, housing associations, churches, charities. I've worked for 6 National Health Service trusts. The largest portfolio I've managed was about £1 billion, covered a bit, most of the UK and Europe. I've managed 3 acute hospitals, 12 mental health care hospitals, 2 elective hospitals and around 200 community health units. And I recently joined Queen Victoria Hospital, which I'd say is probably not as chaotic as most. What their issue is they want to move forward with their strategy, and they're a bit in the past in terms of their estates and facilities, so let's just join those two together. So QVH aside, as I said, what I go to do is I try and get some order in place. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I've described as a visual representation of the strategy and decision making of an organisation. Basically it's a picture. So it's a visual representation. For me, as I said, I like to find the context of what I'm doing, and often, I don't know about you, but I find when I go somewhere I'm stuck in the operational stuff. I'm trying to find out car parking spaces, water management, where the coffee machine should be, has the CEO got his right sign on his car park space, all those sort of things, when really what we should be doing, like yourselves, is directing and managing and developing the portfolio. We should be operating at a higher level. So we mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, the first thing I'll show you is a triangle, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you imagine as you rise through the triangle, what it is about decision making. So the higher up you go, the more important the decisions that are being made. So what tends to happen though is at the base of the triangle, and I'll go through it in a second, put some detail to it so you know what I'm talking about. At the base of the triangle, you're stuck in the weeds. But what should be happening is the information should be going up higher and higher through the organisation. So as when an external change happens or an event happens in the horizon, you can see it coming towards you because you've got some management structure. If you're all stuck in the weeds, things come along and hit you, and it's even more chaos. So the sort of things I'm talking about for the NHS are like a charity commission, a CQC, Care Quality Commission visit. They do unannounced visits. A couple of weeks ago at Queen Victoria, we had what was called NHS Protect. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. So what, somebody's nodding here. What that is, the security is how you secure and manage safely the patient's environment. And a group of auditors will come in and they'll check your key management, they'll check how you manage your processes to ensure the safety of patients and staff. And it was a very interesting experience, I can tell you. So, the first thing at the base level, we have reactive maintenance and services. So things like, as I said, call-outs for leaking pipes, jammed elevators, car park problems. This is where it's all operational. The next level up, on just at the bottom there, is health and safety and risk management. So what you've got here is you've got slightly more control. You can see what's happening. You're saying, okay, you've got some identified risks. You're thinking, okay, we can put together a risk register. We can have a DATIX reporting, which is what they use in the NHS, which is a recording of incidents, accident books, those sort of things. So you're starting to get some more control. So what we're saying is, as you're going up the triangle, you're getting more control. And you think about, okay, where do I fit? Am I stuck in the weeds and therefore I can't actually influence what's going on in terms of the chaos around me, or am I starting to get control? In the middle layer, I've put planned work because here it's sort of starting to get more control. So you have things like planned maintenance, space planning, resource planning, finance, HR. And this is where I feel that as senior managers and directors, we should be operating, at least at this level, if not higher up. It's where we can actually start getting the information from below, producing the dashboards for the people above, so they can then make the executive decisions which will drive the direction of the organisation, helps to develop the strategy. The next level is operational remodelling, capital planning. So if you've got planning in place, if you've managed your risks, if you sort out all the operational stuff, then operational remodelling is actually quite simple. We heard earlier this morning about change management. If you haven't got the stuff down below sorted out, it's going to be really difficult to do this because it's just lurching from one thing to the other. And I've experienced that with organisations. They can just sort of lurch. They say, right, we're going to introduce this change. And a question was asked this morning about when does change go wrong? And I've seen it go wrong on a spectacular scale in a national organisation. And the change was supposed to take place over a couple of years. It just didn't happen because they hadn't sorted out the base layers first. And then you've got structural change. So if you've got the planning right, operational modelling right, then you're thinking about, okay, so as an organisation, if we're growing, if we're going to develop new outlets, say, in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, we can do it because based on the information that's coming up, the decision making, mergers, acquisitions, downsizing, it's all got to be based on intelligence. If you haven't got the intelligence from the bottom, you will not be able to do much difference. And then the final one is external change. If you've got control, then when external change like a severe weather event or a legislative change comes along, you're okay. If you haven't got control, then you know things are going to go wrong. So I've got a couple of things there. So in terms of cost, it's pretty obvious. At the bottom of the triangle, cost is fairly low. Okay, so car park space, coffee machine, those sort of things. But as you're going up, the costs increase. The next thing is, as you ascend the triangle, you see the impact and the urgency. The impact of change increases. Sorry, yes. What should happen is urgency should go, I think, from top to bottom. So the senior directors should be really concentrating on what are the big things that are happening. What tends to happen, though, in chaotic organisations is all the senior manager resources going down to the bottom of the triangle. So they actually take their eye off the ball, and that's what I say, when the big changes happen, they don't know what's going on. So things get stuck at the bottom. So if you think about your organisation, okay, whereabouts would you say, and this is a rhetorical question, so you don't have to answer, but whereabouts would you say you fit? Where do you feel that you are in the organisation? Are you sitting at the top and you know that it's all happening and you know you've got order, or are you stuck somewhere towards the bottom? So that's then I developed a framework around this. So from my point of view, as I said, I get taken into places where it's chaotic. Dictionary describes that as a total lack of organisation or order. My own sense is it's just a feeling of overwhelm. In terms of property and facilities management, chaos is whatever you do and whatever you want, it's always just out of reach. You can never quite get to that thing that you're trying to do because something else is always coming along. And chaos also causes fear. People can be really aggressive or they can be defensive. I can't think of the term, it's called, I can't think of the term, so people are defensive, but they, on the outside they appear really friendly, but you know that underneath they're planning something else, and it's not a good place, chaos. And the problem for directors in the middle of that triangle is your executive want results, your workforce want direction, and you're stuck in the middle in this chaotic environment. And a big part of the problem I found is the lack of investment. So from the NHS point of view, a lot of the trusts I've been to 10, 15 years ago, when the cuts started to happen, what would happen was they'd stop spending money on maintenance. So it would be a replacement only, not a maintain. So consequently, 10 years later, everything's failing across the NHS in terms of the estates and facilities because they haven't invested in maintenance. And you see that also in the workforce. They've cut the workforce back too far. And a lot of my job is actually trying to explain to the executive, look, we actually need to invest a lot more in that. One place I went to, I was introduced and I was told there's about £20 million worth of backlog maintenance to be done on this site. I walked around the site and I said, look, I think you're probably nearer £50 million. We got the surveying company and sure enough, the backlog maintenance was around about £50 million just because of the lack of investment over the last 10 or 15 years. I think the good thing about chaos though is that it does make you sit up and think. It makes you stop because there's just so much going on. And as I said, over the time I've developed this framework which I'm sure a lot of you recognise the stuff, and for some of you it may be, oh, it's too simple, I've got much more technical ways of dealing with this. Absolutely fine, this is just works for me. So at a macro level, I'd call it a risk-based audit tool, and it's formed by some basic questions. What do you own? What is its condition? And what are the associated risks? Those are the three main things you're looking for when you take on a portfolio. What do you own? What is its condition and what's its associated risks? So if we go on to the framework itself, just skip through this bit. Okay, so there's a line going along the middle there. There's some stuff going to go on the bottom. Companies I go to, often they'll say to me, we need an estate strategy. And I'll say, okay, so what's your operational strategy? What's your organisational strategy? Well, they say, well, it's sort of like this and it's sort of like that. Okay, so, but they're still trying to push for you to produce this estate strategy. And often what happens is the estate strategy drives the organisational strategy. So you end up putting things into buildings because they're lovely historic buildings that we mustn't get rid of. And instead of looking at the organisational strategy and also the things that are driving it. When I joined Wexham Park, some of you may know it's over in Slough, I was taken on there for 6 weeks because the property director there, Paul, was retiring. He had to retire before the end of March because the legislation was changed in terms of pensions. And I was given a desk in a leaking porter cabin, and I was given half a page of A4 as a handover document. And this was a trust which was 650 beds. It's an acute trust. It's now merged. It had a stroke unit, a maternity unit, an A&E, an outpatients, a helipad, sterile services, all sorts of things. It really was a matter of life and death. And I was given half a page of A4 and told that's it. So you can imagine how I felt about that. So what was hoped for, what I was told, was the outcome was to be a functioning merged hospital, which wasn't in special measures. So it's quite a tall order. So just looking at the framework, if you look at it, you can see it's a sequential process. So you're starting on your left-hand side. I'm just checking, I've got a screen here in front of me. Left-hand side, you're looking at, as I said, what you own, what conditions it's in, and what's the risk. Now there's some other things there, so, and I'm going to take you very briefly through this because we haven't got a lot of time, and I can take questions afterwards. So it's a quick skim through. Looking at the labels below the line, you've got titles, policies, risk, records management, space utilisation, resourcing and capital programmes. So there is a pattern to this, and the idea is that each of these elements is a framework, a scaffold. So when for me, and it works for me, it might not work for you, so that's fine, but for me, when I'm landed into a place like I was at Wexham, it's a case of, okay, this is going to be longer than 6 weeks. In fact, turned out to be 18 months. It's a scaffold for me. It's the things I can start hanging things on. I can say, okay, what realistically? So one of the things you want to know is, what do we really own? So often organisations they'll either, if you're lucky, they'll have a terrier of information, an asset register. But if you're unlucky, they'll say, oh yes, we own all these properties on this list. And then you start looking, you actually find you've got leases that are out of date or you don't even have, but you're paying for. You've got property that you should have on your register that you didn't realise you've got. And it's quite a muddle. And that's every experience I've had, even at Wexham and even at Queen Victoria Hospital, I've found that. So the first thing is, what do you actually own? What do you have an interest in? So a licence, a lease, a way leave, whatever it is, just shove it all into one place. And then you're thinking about, okay, so what policies has the organisation got to run these? In healthcare, it's very prescriptive. There are very prescriptive health technical memoranda, hospital health bulletins. There's all sorts of things which are prescriptive about healthcare. In your organisation, it might not be, but they can be very useful as drivers for change policies. So it's good just to think about under each of these. You've got titles, then you've got policies and operating procedures. How do we manage this estate? Then thinking about the just below the policies, what's the condition? What's the condition of the estate? Is it wind, watertight and structurally sound? Where is all your money actually going to drain away? So you're all the time thinking, okay, I've got this estate. What are the policies? What's the condition? Then you think, okay, well, I need to get a survey of the thing done fairly quickly if we haven't had one done recently. In healthcare, it's a 6-facet survey, but you may have a full condition survey. Basically, what you're trying to do there is look at levels of compliance. So you're starting to build up a picture of what is the state of your estate. Where are you non-compliant and where are you compliant? Gives you opportunity also to start thinking about building information management, so BIM. So you can think about, okay, can we have some CAD plans? Can we start producing something to hang the intelligence on? So you can start to see how the framework builds while you're dealing with all the noise that carries on, because with an organisation like a large trust, there's an awful lot of noise. You know, you may have, we were regularly going into what's called black, which basically means you shut the door to A&E and you say nobody else can come in because we're full, which means you have to sort out all the beds, you have to sort out all sorts of things. So you've got all this noise coming in one ear and you're being told, well, we need to sort the portfolio out, we need to sort the estate out, we need to sort the facilities out, we need to get the cost of catering down, we need to sort out the waste. So you need some way of doing that, and that's why the framework. The next thing is talking about is a computer-aided facilities management system, a database, an intelligent way of actually starting to get, you've built the information, you're putting it into a system, you want to start drawing that information out to get intelligent reports. If you remember, I explained about the dashboard that you want to deliver to people. So what we're trying to do is think about, okay, well, it's a dashboard of information. What would really be helpful? What's the energy management like on our estate? So you think, okay, to get that, I need to put something into the CAFM system, to the database, to get the information out. What's waste management like? What are the catering figures like? Are we making any money on this, or are we making a huge loss? And often you haven't actually got that information. So this just helps to pull that together. You of course also get your customer services, your help desk, all those sort of things are starting to build in this framework. Once people get to know you and get to see things are starting to happen, then you get even more noise. But it's more, actually we can start to get things moving on this thing. What tends to happen though is people say in an estate, they see an office which is empty and they'll say, right, I'm going to move into there. If they find you're actually running this, I don't know if you found this, they'll ask you, is it okay if we move in there? And you found they've moved anyway. So what you want to do is start having some control. So on here you'll see is a space utilisation and planning. So it's the thing, okay, what helpful process can we give to our organisation which won't stop them moving around and developing and being innovative, but will give me some form of control over the estate and portfolio? What can I put in place? So that's where you're thinking about space utilisation and planning. So under each of these headings, if you like, there's an awful lot of detail, and you can be as detailed as you like and make this as complicated as you like. The more complicated, the harder it is to manage it. So that's why they're simple titles. The other thing is, so at the end there you've got HR and finance and resourcing. I think probably, from my point of view, the most important aspect of the estates and facilities are the people who run it. I found that when I was at Wexham, we had PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, the Department of Health, the CQC, Monitor. We had the estates team and the facilities team. We had the executive. We had the other executive from the other trust, and they're all asking for information, all doing sorts of things. And there was no coherence because there had been no investment in people and no team building, all those sort of just the simple things. So what we did was we actually talked about how we could invest in people. And under that disc, you'll have a whole working with HR, working with the unions, working with your teams. You'll think about what is it. Alan talked about the why question this morning in his talk. Why are we doing this? You explain to people what we're trying to achieve. And for Wexham, it was going from a place which was absolute and utter chaos. Just thinking of the time. Are we okay for time? Just thinking, yeah. I was going to tell you an anecdote. That was all. I was just making sure we have enough time. So anecdotally, one of the things that I came across when I was at Wexham was I was taken to the bed store. The bed store, as I explained to you, is when you're in black, okay, that means you need all the beds you can get. But when you get out of black status and you're in green, your beds have got to go somewhere so as they're ready to come back out if you need them. So you take them to a bed store. Well, I was taken to this place which was a 20 or 30 bed ward, which is a porter cabin. So you can imagine the size of the space. It's probably, I'd say, 2 or 3 times as big as this space. That's about right. And it was a porter cabin, so that's fine. Okay, but the thing was, the porter cabin had leaked. So to get over the leaks, they lined it all with black plastic in the roof. So if you imagine the lights, the roof lights or the leaks, the plastic was sort of filled with water, okay? And then because the windows were all a bit leaky, they put plastic down the sides. And then because the floor had got all wet, the floor was like wavy and rotten. And then they'd taken all the lights out and they'd filled it full of junk. And then they used this as a bed store where all the patients had to sleep on these beds. That was the chaos that we faced at Wexham. So after finding out about this, 2 weeks later, that was demolished. And we managed to find a proper bed store. The mattress store was the same. And that's because people, getting back to the point, just a long way back, but investing in people realise you cannot do that. And what tends to happen is that if you disconnect, and it's what happened at mid-staffs as well, if you disconnect people from the process of what they're actually investing in, disconnect people from what they're trying to do, which is patient care and safety, then they say, well, it doesn't matter. You know, I don't understand what's the problem. And you have to actually explain to people the why of what we're doing, which in healthcare is obviously about care and safety of patients. You and I, we go to hospital, so we're all invested. I find with, so just on the bottom left, quality audit systems, quality assurance systems. So there's some really good quality assurance systems. And by these, I simply mean you've got all this information now, not all it's in CAD, not all it's in the CAFM system. When the CQC turn up, or when Ofsted turn up, or when NHS Protect turn up, or another body, they want information. They don't want to be waiting weeks for it, they want it now. With the quality audit system or quality assurance system, what you've got is a way of actually being able to pull on this information, pull on the files. So often in chaotic situations, I've asked about water management, what's the water management plan? So you have to manage Legionella and Pseudomonas in healthcare and everywhere else really. So you should have, there's a whole process, a whole organisational structure, a whole governance structure, there's legislation, everything. You go into a chaotic situation and it is all to pot. Okay, so an assurance system just makes sure you've got these processes all lined up. So you're just saying, okay, for each of these, you're saying, how is it? So if you imagine these discs, if you said, right, they're green for good or red for bad, in your organisation, you could say, okay, well, probably about 10% are amber and the rest are fine, or they're all red. It just starts to give you an idea where you're pinpointing what's going on. Contracts registered. So I hope I've got enough time to carry on, but contracts registered. When, in terms of compliance, what I found is that contracts are you need to be compliant with air handling units, with water management systems, with catering, so the environmental health wants you to know the fridges have got the right temperatures and they're easily displayed, all those sort of things. If you haven't got a contracts register, what tends to happen is you're not quite sure where the contracts are. So you may have a contract which is in date, but it might not be. And I'm sure if your suppliers, you may be saying, yeah, I know I've got clients who don't know whether I've got a contract in date or not. A lot of the places I've gone to, they have not got a contracts register. And when you check, they've actually run out of, they're out of date on some very critical parts of kit. Okay, and that is so important. So I just put in here that you really do need to have a contracts register and you need to understand where you are. And even at QVH, we've had a weekly meeting trying to get those things sorted out. So okay, I mean, I've just given you a very, very quick run through. There's a couple of other points there. Sustainability, development. To me, as a speaker earlier was saying about network, I mean, it's just so vital. I've always found it vital for, personally for me, in terms of how we understand the whole picture in terms of the portfolio we're running. So it's not just about waste management, it's not just about energy management, and it's not just about the estates and facilities, it's about the whole organisation and how they take this on board. But we can take a lead in this, I think, as estates and facilities people. We can guide and help people take a really good stance on this. And then if you get all that right, then you're into disposals and capital planning, because you can actually then start horizon planning. You're at the top of your triangle in terms of the thing I showed you earlier. You can say, okay, this is the direction we're going to go. We're going to get rid of these things that we don't need, and we're going to plan for the future in these things we do need. It's a very quick run through. There's some nuances for yourselves in your own organisations. You may not find some of those titles relevant. You could replace them with others. From my point of view, it's the is it called a mnemonic? Keep it simple, stupid, KISS. The simpler it is, as long as it's got critical information in there, it helps you then say, okay, I've done an audit of where we are. I've got some control over the bottom of this. Now I can start planning the estate strategy, because it actually gives you a general direction of where you're going. That's how I've found. So when I go into a chaotic situation and they say, can I do the estate strategy? I'll say, no, I need to know where we are first before we can start planning that. So a bit more about Wexham Trust. As I said, I stayed there for 18 months. Just before I joined, they were placed in special measures, and it was special measures and special measures. I think we probably weren't far behind mid-staffs in terms of, as I said, the bed store was one case in point. It was chaotic. And the area that I looked after, at Estates and Facilities, I worked through this because it was the only way that I could actually get a handle on what was going on. There was just so much. It really was, it was one job that I was nearly completely overwhelmed by. But in the end, I'm pleased to say that just before I left, we had a CQC visit. And amazingly, they couldn't believe the transformation. The trust achieved a good, which is a green rating. So I don't say that it was all down to me. It'd be nice if it was, but no. There's a whole team of people who work. I was part of the team, and we looked after the estates and facilities side. And it's because it was done in a structured way, and people, the whole team, knew what they're doing. We were able to make some considerable savings. We saved about 8% of the budget for the year I was there, but it didn't mean that we were cutting back on maintenance. We saved the budgets by making the efficiencies that we needed to. And so with the small part that I played, we achieved that good. And then the funny thing was, I went to Queen Victoria Hospital a couple of weeks later, and they had a CQC inspection when I arrived. And it was the same two inspectors that I'd seen at Wexham. So I said, well, this is what we're doing. And fortunately, there wasn't a lot down to me. They got a good as well with an outstanding. So I was very pleased with that. So that's the framework I just wanted to share with you about how I manage portfolios. And if it's any help to you, that's fine. You can take that away with you. If it's not, then that's maybe share it with somebody else. Thank you very much.